Hello everybody, welcome back to my Pro Tools videos. My name is McKay Tebbs, and today we're going to be talking about Pro Tools 110, Lesson 7, More Editing. And some of the topics we'll be talking about from this chapter include following the main time scale, the clips and markers setting, cutting and pasting in relative grid mode, how to suspend the grid mode, how to trim the ends and beginnings of clips and trim to selection. And you probably already know that, but it's some cool keyboard commands to do that. We're also going to be talking about the separation grabber, nuanced nudging, and the keyboard commands to do that. And last of all, we're going to be talking about edit groups and how you can use them when you're working in Pro Tools. So let's get started. All right, so here we have my Pro Tools session. And one of the first things I want to show you is how to follow the main time scale. So this is the main time scale up here. It says main, and it's contrasting it with the sub time scale. And if you click on the arrow, you can decide what you want to have for both your main time scale and your sub time scale. But what we want to use in conjunction with that is the grid mode. Grid mode is one of the most commonly used working modes in Pro Tools up here in the left-hand corner. And what you can do is you can come to this little menu here in the grid window and click on it. And down at the bottom, there's this option to follow main time scale. So when you select it, it's going to have a check mark placed next to it. And that means it will follow the main time scale. So right now, my main time scale is set to bars and beats. So bar 27, beat 1. And that means that my grid mode is going to follow it. Now, why that's important is because sometimes in a session, you might change your main time scale. So if I do that and change it to minutes and seconds, you'll notice that my grid mode automatically changed to match minutes and seconds because I put follow the main time scale. And down here, you'll see that the grid changes. So as you change your main time scale, the grid is going to change to reflect that new time scale. So it's just a nice option to have if you plan to be changing your time scales a lot so that your grid will always reflect whatever time scale you have selected. Another option you can pick in there is this option that says clips/markers. So usually when you're importing a clip into your session, you're going to bring it over and drag it, and you're going to try and line it up with where it needs to be. So here I have a clip here. Let's say I want it to line up to match the end of these other clips that are up here. So I'm bringing it in, I'm dragging it, and I'm just making sure to place it right there. So that works, and that can be an effective way to do things. But another option or another way of doing it could be to have this option enabled here that says clips and markers. And when you have that enabled, if you drag a clip into your session and drop it, it will automatically line up with wherever the clip end is, the other clip ends. So right here, I have these clip ends on top. If I drag this clip right here, it will want to lock in with those clip ends. So it's kind of an easy way to put something exactly where you want it. But it does say clips/markers. So not only can you lock it in with the beginning and ends of clips, you can also lock it in with your markers wherever they are. So as I continue to grab this clip and drag it, it wants to snap to right where these markers are that are already placed in the session. So that can be really handy if you have dialogue you're editing or sound effects, and they're all supposed to happen at a certain point in your mix. You can put this on so that everything will always snap to a certain marker where the sounds are supposed to happen. Up here we have our 4 edit modes. We have slip mode and grid mode. They're the most commonly used modes. Grid mode has 2 versions to it. It has relative grid mode and absolute grid mode. Usually we're always using absolute grid mode, and that's where things line up to the bar and the beat. But in relative grid mode, it always lines up in between the lines. So here in grid mode, if I try dragging this clip right now, it's going to drag, but it's going to drag in the same increment in between the bar lines that it already was. Since this clip the start of this clip is in between two different bar lines with relative grid mode, I can drag in between it. But the cool thing is you can also do some copying and pasting work in relative grid mode. If I come to this clip in relative grid mode and copy it, and I paste it at the next bar line that I select, notice that it doesn't paste on that bar line, but it pastes in relativity to how the original clip was placed on a line. So this clip was early, so if I paste it, then I can select a bar line, but it's actually going to start in the relative time space that the first clip started. So you can relatively copy and paste in relative grid mode as well as move things in relative grid mode when you need to. Now, since grid mode and slip mode are both the most common two modes to work in, usually to get back and forth, you have to click back and forth on their names like this. Wouldn't it be nice to get back and forth between those two modes without having to go up there with your mouse and click? And there is a way, and the way to do that is to use your command key. So if I drag this clip right here, it's always going to match the bar line because I'm in grid mode. But if I just hold down command while I'm grabbing this clip, suddenly I can suspend it from grid mode and go into slip mode for a second. So when you hold down command and drag, it suspends grid mode and it allows you to not line up with the beat. And you don't even have to go up to the top left and click back and forth. You just hold down command, you drag it, and drop it where you want it. Let's talk for a minute about trimming. If I wanted to trim this clip right here, I could hover over it with my trim tool and drag it this way, or I could drag it that way. And that's the usual way that we're able to trim a clip. There's also keyboard commands that help you to do that. When you make a selection, you put your selector where you want the clip to begin or end. And then by using the S key, you can automatically trim away the end of the clip. Or you can trim away the beginning of the clip by hitting the A key. So A key will trim away the beginning of the clip. S key will trim away the end of the clip. So if I have a clip that has a lot of dead space in it at the beginning or at the end, I can drop my cursor, I can hit A, and will automatically trim away that spot at the beginning or the end of the clip that I want to get rid of. Now, sometimes what you want to do when you're making an edit selection is you want to trim the beginning and the end all at once. So yes, you could drop your selector there and hit the S for the end, and then come to the beginning and hit the A for the beginning. But another way to do that would be to make the selection, and after you've made the selection, hit Command T. And by using that Command T shortcut, you're able to trim away both the beginning and the end of the clip at the same time. So you just hit Command T, and we'll trim away the beginning of the clip and the end of the clip. Have you ever noticed that the grabber tool has options? If you click on it, or right click on it, or click down on this little triangle, you can open up the different types of grabber tool options. The most common one we use is the time grabber, and that selects the clips and adjusts them on the timeline depending on when you drag. Let's talk about the separation grabber though. And notice that the separation grabber has scissors on it. This can be a really handy tool, but first of all, you can't really use it by itself. So I've just selected it, but as I'm clipping and dragging, it's doing the same thing that the time grabber tool does. So in order to use it, you need to use it in conjunction with the smart tool or the selector tool. When you make a selection, the cool thing about this tool is that you can grab it and it will automatically cut out what you grab. So you don't have to cut around it ahead of time. You just make a selection, grab it with a separation grabber, and then drop it. So it can be another easy way to save you time when you're making edit selections. Now up here we have the smart tool, and most people are aware of what the smart tool does. It combines the selector tool, the trim tool, and the grabber tool all into one, and it changes depending on where you're hovered over the clip. But there is a fourth thing that the smart tool does. Remember, to activate the smart tool, you just click on that bar up there, and then it activates all three of those tools at a time. So if I come to this clip right here, and if I hover on the bottom half of the clip, I'm going to get the grabber tool. If I hover on the top half of the clip, I'm going to get the selector tool. And if I hover on the left or right of the clip, I get the trim tool. So most people, when they're working in their sessions, they're using the smart tool so they can quickly travel between these three main tools without having to go up and click between them to make them work. But there is a fourth thing that the smart tool does, and it's called fades. As soon as you hover over the top left or right corner and click and drag, you can immediately create a fade on that clip that you're clicking and dragging. So there are four things that the smart tool does. Don't forget the fourth one, which is fades. I've just created a fade in and a fade out. It's also possible to create crossfade. So I made an edit selection there, and now I created crossfades. When you do a crossfade, you have to start at the bottom of the clip where the crossfade we want it to be, and then kind of drag it up and over to the side. Crossfades are really handy when you have clips that are end to end, because that's how you get rid of the clicks and pops that you hear when you push play. So you want to make sure you do your crossfades anytime you have clips that are end to end with each other. Let's talk a little bit now about the Option key reverse. Here, I have the zoomer tool. If I click on my session with the zoomer tool, I will zoom in. If I hold down the Option key, my plus in the middle of that zoomer tool changes to be a minus, and now I will zoom out. So it's important to remember that Option key does the reverse action of things. And we're going to talk about three of them right now. The first one is the zoomer tool. Let's do it with the trim tool now. If I want to trim the end of this clip right here, I hover over the end and I can trim it in. I could also trim the beginning of the clip by holding down Option. See how the direction changes? And now if I click, I just trimmed the beginning of the clip, so the beginning of the clip is no longer there. So by holding down Option, you can reverse the direction of your clip to change it whatever direction you want, or when you're using the trim tool to change it whatever direction you want. And there's one more place to use this Option key reverse, and that's when you're using the pencil tool. If you get your pencil tool ready, you can click and draw MIDI ticks into your timeline. But if you want to erase that MIDI tick you just drew, you can hit Option key, and then you'll get this eraser button, and you can make it disappear. So you can draw with the pencil, you can take away what you drew by holding down Option and clicking on whatever you want to make disappear. So let's talk really quick about the layered editing button. This is the layered editing button right here. Usually it's a good idea to leave it on, but let's see what happens if I do some editing without the layered button turned on. So here it is turned off. I'm going to make an edit selection right here, and I'm going to drag the piece that I just selected and cover up the same clip. You'll notice that the parts that I cover up are now gone. It like eats it. And if I go in the middle of the clip and drop it, then it eats that part that was covered up. So maybe that could be a useful way for you to edit, but usually you don't want to lose the information that is previously on the clip. So let's do the same thing now, and let's hit the layered edit button and turn it on. And this time when we drag it and drop it and then go back, we do not take away anything from the previous clip. Or if I want to take a whole clip and drag it down, and I cover up that next clip and then drag it away, it will still be there. If the layered editing button is off when I do that, I'm going to cover up that clip, drag it away, and it will be gone. So always make sure you have your layered editing button set the way that you want it to function in your session. And a nice default way to do it is to just leave it on. Okay, let's talk a little bit now about nuanced nudging. So you might remember from previous courses what nudging is. When you do nudging, you select a clip, and I'm going to zoom in for this. And with that clip selected, you can then nudge it. So nudging is where you push the plus and minus key on your keyboard pad This is on the numeric number side of your keyboard pad. There's a plus and minus. And by pushing that plus and minus, you can go back and forth. You can also do it here with the plus, or sorry, with the comma and the period on your keyboard pad. You can push the comma and period back and forth and make it go to, so there's two different spots. There are also different options for nudging that you need to know about. And this is also a kind of trim nudging. Wouldn't it be nice if we could trim the edges of this clip by nudging? And we can by using the modifier keys as we do that, these modifier keys right here. So I'm going to first start with command, and when I push down command, and then I push the plus sign, well, actually I'll push minus first. Notice that the end of the clip gets either taken away or added to when you push down command. So command is for nudging the end of the clip. Let's go to the next key. Next is the option key. If I hold down option and then I minus and take away, I can nudge the beginning of the clip. So option is for nudging the beginning of the clip. Command is for nudging the end of the clip. And there's more. Control nudges the clip contents. So look at the insides of the clip, the waveform itself. When you hold down control, you can nudge that waveform that's inside the clip back and forth to wherever you want it to be, lining up on your timeline. And finally, shift is for nudging the edit selection itself. When you hold down shift and nudge, and the selection can move from side to side. So maybe there's a certain part of the song you're trying to select. And so you can, you can nudge that selection just by holding down the shift key. So once again, command is for the end of the clip. Option is for the beginning of the clip. Control is for the clip contents, to move the contents of the clip back and forth. Shift is for the edit selection that is grabbing that clip. So those are some good ones to know. Those are definitely going to be on the test. I remember some questions talking about which keys modify the nuanced nudging and which one does what. So you do have to remember, oh, command is the end of the clip. Oh, option is the beginning of the clip. Control is the content. Shift is the edit selection. All right, and the last thing we're going to talk about today is edit groups. Edit groups, what are they? How do you make them? And how do you work with them? First of all, let's go down here to the bottom left corner. See where it says groups in your window. These are your edit groups. I already have two edit groups selected or created, the drums and the synthetic groups. So let's talk about how to create groups. But what you can do with edit groups is it allows you to work on multiple tracks at the same time. So let's say that you're working on bar 25 and all the tracks need to have something cut out and have all the tracks shifted over. If you have a lot of tracks in your session, that's a lot of work to go from track to track and do it one at a time. But by activating the groups, you can do a whole group of tracks, do one edit, and it will apply to all the tracks at the same time. So it saves you a lot of time. There is a keyboard command to create an edit group, and that command is Command G. So go ahead and click Command G. And when you do that, you get the create group box coming in. And right here, you can create a group. So I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to name this group guitars because I am going to put all the guitar tracks in here. This is from a previous group. I'm going to remove that. Now I'm going to come here to my available tracks list, and I'm just going to select all the tracks that are guitar tracks and make sure that they get put here into my guitars group. I push add. And after I add them, I come down here to the bottom and just push OK. And now my groups list has an additional group called guitars created right here. And it's there. Notice how some of these group names are blue, some aren't, or one isn't, now it is. You can click on the group names to change the color, but what that really does is it activates and deactivates that group. So if you want to have your groups working, then they need to be blue and you need to click on them and select them. Sometimes you don't, because sometimes you're working in a group and that's great for one thing, but then later on there's one track you need to work on, not the whole group. So you need to deactivate your group by clicking on it, and then you can just work on that one track. And then later on you come back and click on your group to activate it again and later on you can activate it. And there's another command to know, and this is to suspend groups, because sometimes you want to suspend your groups. And that is Shift Command G. If you hit Shift Command G, that will suspend your groups. So what's the difference between suspending your group and deactivating your group? Well, not a lot, actually. Let's just say it like that. But the cool thing is if you learn this keyboard command, then at those times when you want to quickly deactivate the group, rather than coming down here and clicking on it, like I'm showing you, you can do, you can click on it. You can just do the keyboard command, Shift Command G, and it will automatically activate and deactivate your groups you have selected there. But now that I have these groups selected, I can come over here, for example, to my synth group. That's these purple tracks right here. And I'm going to click on one of the tracks and they're all selected. And now I'm going to click on the tracks themselves and notice how I have this huge bar line here across all the tracks. So if I start editing on this track, I can then have those edits apply to all the tracks at one time. So it can be a handy way to edit tracks. If you have edits to do across multiple tracks, rather than do the same thing over and over on each of those tracks, just activate the track group and then you can do it all on them at the same time. But perhaps the most beneficial reason to using a clip group is because when things are grouped together, like these purple tracks, this synth group, you can then click on one fader and move all the faders at the same time. So as you're creating submixes and you have the level between all of the one instruments, like in this case, all the synth instruments, you have all those levels set, but you just want to raise all their levels at the same time or lower all their levels. You can do that just by clicking them. So here's my drum tracks at the beginning. They're all grouped together. So if I click on one fader, they all move at the same time. So that's probably the biggest benefit when you're mixing is you can move multiple faders at the same time. Now, sometimes you don't want to move all the faders, or sometimes you realize that one fader in that group is not at the right level. So how do you control that one fader without having to go back and forth all the time and click the activate, deactivate button? You can do that by hitting or pushing the control key and then clicking on the group. So here I'm pulling the group up and down. If I hold control down, now I'm just doing that one fader. I let go of control, and now that one fader stays where I left it. So hitting control will free you from the group for a moment so that you can make adjustments to the group without having to go back to the edit window and come down here and click it off and go back to the mix window and then make an adjustment and then go back to the edit window and turn it on again. It's kind of cumbersome. So remember the control key. Also, there's something called unity click. If you hold down Option and click any fader in the group, it will bring all faders to unity. Unity means 0, so the number is 0. So it's a quick way to get all your faders to be set to 0. Just Option clicking and setting them to unity like that. So here's my synth tracks. I'm going to control click to put them at different levels. And then I'm going to click on all of them together to raise them up like that. And now I want to start over. So I'm going to Option click and unity 0. There they are. All right. Well, thanks for coming to the lesson today and learning more about editing techniques in Pro Tools. That wraps it up for now, but I'll see you in the next video.